Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. In today's webinar, we will be covering the topic Management of Diabetes mellitus in India, critical analysis of all the guidelines. In this webinar, we would be precisely discussing on aspects such as what level of blood glucose we need to start the pharmacotherapy and also beyond lifestyle management, how to interpret different diabetes management guidelines, how differently we can manage diabetes guidelines in Indian patients, and also how to improve diabetes awareness and treatment. I'd like to introduce the speakers for today's webinar. Dr. Sadanand Shetty is an eminent personality in the medical fraternity. He is an emeritus professor, Dr. D.Y. Patil University School of Medicine, Mumbai. Dr. Shetty heads cardiology, Somaya Super Specialty Institute, Mumbai. He is also the founder of Sadanand G2S2 Foundation and Chief Medical Editor for Sadanand Healthy Living Center, Mumbai. Dr. Sadanand Shetty is also Editor-in-Chief for Cleveland Hall of Fame Biography and Patient Education book, and also founder CVD India and CAA International. We have our moderator, Dr. Milind Phadke, is a consultant interventional cardiologist, is associate professor in cardiology, LTM Medical College and LTMG Hospital, Mumbai. Dr. Milind is a gold medalist in DM cardiology from GS Medical College and KEM Hospital, Mumbai. He has close to 40 peer-reviewed journals and 6 book chapters to his name. A couple of instructions for attendees. Please ensure the internet connectivity is good to have a seamless experience. By default, all the attendees are on listen-only mode. Attendees can type in their questions in the chat box, or they can also raise hand and we will unmute them to ask the questions. Also, if attendees are facing any challenge in joining it with Zoom, we are streaming live on Facebook, and you can use the White Coats page where you can watch the webinar. Thank you. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Sadanand Shetty to start the webinar.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, White Coat, for giving us this opportunity. And the first webinar we had a few weeks ago on hypertension management. Today we are going to discuss on the management of diabetes in India in 2020 and critical analysis of all the existing guidelines. You may wonder why cardiologist is speaking on diabetes. To me, diabetes is a cardiovascular, the problem. If I have to simplify the definition, diabetes is a vascular disease diagnosed by doing blood sugar. And when you talk about diabetes, it is, cardiovascular diabetology. So the current terminology is cardiovascular diabetology. And therefore, we have formed Cardiovascular Diabetology India in the White Coat, where you can click into the app and you can join our app, and it is a free, and we have continuous teaching material we upload regularly on this app. So today the topic is the recent guideline updates on the management of diabetes and the update from our own RSDA, the Endocrine Society of India 2020. In fact, that has just published about a couple of months ago. And then of course the ADA 2020, European, the EASD 2019, and the NICE guideline, which is not put here, which came in, this year. So NICE 2020. What I'm going to discuss is to focus more on our own Indian guideline and with a passing remarks of the other guideline, because during the discussion of about 30-35 minutes, we can't discuss everything in one particular talk, but I'm going to give you the overview what we need to know in 2020 to manage diabetes. So this is the landmark, the guideline which came recently, couple of months back, and it is also published in the Indian Journal of Endocrine Metabolism. and the update is jointly like ICDI and the ESI. ESI is a clinical practice recommendation, particularly for the Indian subsets. So now let us talk about this illness, point by point. Now let us see about the diagnosis of diabetes. What is the recommendation for a diabetes diagnosis? We diagnose pre-diabetes with the following parameters. That is impaired fasting glucose between 100 to 125 and impaired glucose tolerance 2 hours post glucose after 75 gram of the oral glucose is 140 to 199 and A1C anywhere between 5.7 and 6.4. And we diagnose diabetes with the following criteria, that is fasting blood sugar more than 126. Here if you see it is 100 to 125, more than 125 or 126 is the fasting, and the fasting blood glucose more than 125 and or 2 hour post glucose is more than 200 after 75 gram. Here it is up to 199 and A1C equal to more than 6.5 is for diagnosis of diabetes, and between 5.7 and 6.4 is a pre-diabetes. If you have got any random sugar of more than or equal to 200 milligram, and the patient has a classical symptoms of diabetes, then you can also make a diagnosis of a diabetes. However, if a patient is asymptomatic, single abnormal test should have the test repeated to confirm the diagnosis unless the result is unequivocal. So important to diagnose pre-diabetes and also diabetes. Pre-diabetes is important for us, particularly cardiological problem, vascular problem, because of our observation in our routine real world practice, lot of patients with a coronary artery disease do suffer at the pre-diabetes. As a matter of fact, in our Indian patient, it is not the duration or the type of diabetes matters. It is just abnormal glucose, like what I say, the dysmetabolism or a dysglycemia. So dysglycemia is the pathology, and that gives vascular problem, and therefore it is important for us to diagnose pre-diabetes as well as diabetes. Now the diabetes is limited care. This is a recommended. Diabetes can be diagnosed with any of the following. As I mentioned above, more or less are safe. Fasting sugar more than or equal to 126 and 2 hours after the 75 gram glucose equal to more than 200 and equal to 200 blood sugar in the presence of symptoms. So basically, this is the first thing we must remember, how to diagnose diabetes. Any medical illness, important thing on what are the criteria to make diagnosis. Now let us come to what are the recommended glycemic value for Indian patient with type 2 diabetes. Now we have made a diagnosis, pre-diabetes and diabetes. Now you have after started treatment, whatever therapeutic lifestyle, diet, etc., or a pharmacotherapy. Now you have a patient of an established type 2 diabetes. Now what are the recommended glycemic value? Recommended is fasting between 100 to 125, post 2 hours post PPG, that is after the eating or after the 75 grams glucose is between 140 to 199. 75 gram is basically standardized test, and for a standardized, the value, and A1C 5.7 to 6.4 is a recommended glycemic value for patient with the type 2 diabetes. Now let us first come to what is the role of medical nutrition therapy, or in a simple terms, as a diet in type 2 diabetes. Now the thing, what is the four major, like the food, carbohydrate, fats, proteins, and the diet pattern, etc. If you look here carbohydrate, we know that as such Indian diet is carbocentric. So we need to, and we know that type 2 diabetes is a dysglycemia, the abnormal glucose metabolism. So we need to remember that we have to restrict the carbohydrate 50 to 60% of the total caloric intake. Very, very important issue. The glycemic index and the glycemic load are important. Rice quantity limited, again carbohydrate diet. fiber intake between 20 to 40 grams. Now let us come to the fat, 30% total caloric intake. Oil rotation is recommended. The one which we recommend, whatever monosaturated, polyunsaturated by rotation, so that you get value of everything like omega-3, omega-6, etc. Food with the high saturated fats must be avoided, more into like a polysaturated, unsaturated, etc. Saturated fatty acid less than 10% total calorie. Avoid hydrogenated vegetable oil. These are more or less same standard as before, but this is important for us before going further when we talk about diet therapy in type 2 diabetes. Proteins, 15% the total caloric intake. Consider the other comorbidity like renal status, age of the patient. We have to limit the red meat or prefer other source of protein, because again, in a diabetic specifically, we need, particularly when the renal disease or the chronic kidney disease sets in, we have to be more cautious. Few other important things in the diet pattern: diet rich in fruits, vegetables, leafy, nuts, fibers, whole grain, unsaturated fats, pulse, legumes, unprocessed vegetable, low fat dairy. Salt consumption is important, less than 5 grams, and artificial sweeteners less than 2 to 3 grams. Salt is important because, as we discussed before earlier webinar, hypertension, diabetes coexist nearly in 50% of the patient, and therefore the salt consumption we need to see down, so that we keep both the parameter, blood pressure as well as the diabetes, comes under control. Now let us talk about the lifestyle changes and the behavioral change, what we call as the BLI, behavioral lifestyle intervention patient with type 2 diabetes. We need to have this in every patient with type 2 diabetes. Cost-effective approach in prevention should be reviewed yearly, and at the time of any treatment visits. Every time we have to re-emphasize this point to our patient. Physical activity should be introduced gradually, and the intensity of activity should be individualized to the specific goal. A minimum of 150 minutes per week is the physical activity is recommended for an healthy person in view of the high predisposition to develop type 2 diabetes and CAD. We can have more also, but minimum 150 minutes per week is okay. Equal to more than 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity each day, 15 to 30 minutes of work-related activity, again important. When we are working, like we as doctors sitting in our office, if we move with one room to another during examining the patient, or in a hospital when we are moving, using lift, etc. So work-related activity additionally 15 to 30 minutes per day is a added value in the physical activity. And the other important thing is 15 minutes of muscle strengthening exercise at least 3 times a week. This is also important. Essentially more of, like a gripping, isometric exercise, etc. Basically, they are more into strengthen the muscle, more so important as the age advances. Use of monitoring tool like accelerometry, GPS units, speedometer, mobile-based app devices for measuring the intensity and duration of physical activity may be encouraged. Like today in an era of technology is easy, by the mobile-based app, per day, or by pedometer how much you did activity, etc. This will encourage individual that they are doing regular physical activity. Patient counseling for self-monitoring and stimulus control important. Strategy to improve for better sustained effect is important. Ultimately, we must remember these are chronic diseases. Ultimately, consistency is the key. We have to see that the effect is sustained, maintained, and therefore it is important to improve the patient's, the own involvement, and also educating on self-management through doctors or diabetic educators. We as doctors may not have enough time, but we should have educator, nurse educator, or some health professional educator who will explain about the diabetes and particularly the behavioral lifestyle intervention. Now, what are the recommended oral, anti-diabetic drugs? Of course, the most common is the metformin among the biguanides. We know that the effect on weight is maybe little weight loss, maybe neutral, not significant weight loss like a GLP-1 RA or like an SGLT2 inhibitor. beneficial effect on the cardiovascular system, reducing the LDL, increasing HDL, and so on. In a patient with heart failure, advanced older patient, we should be cautious. Otherwise, in a mild or NYHA class 1 or 2, we can still use metformin. In fact, there are many trials or a study where metformin is used with a lower ejection fraction, but in the class 1 or 2, not in advanced heart failure. One of the things is a lactic acidosis, but that is more critical. We don't see in practice that much, but we have to remember any sick patient who is hypoxic, who is hypovolemic, hypotensive, a patient who is in sepsis, we should carefully avoid this drug, because then that particular situation, the environment patient in that situation can put patient on lactic acidosis when he is on metformin. By itself, this side effects is very, very uncommon. First line drug therapy of choice for type 2. There is no question about the use of metformin in our practice. This is the most important drug. In fact, the first line, and it is going to remain. This is a drug which is first line for long time. Even in 2020 it is, and it is going to remain for till such time that possibly with the advent of GLP-1, the receptor agonist and SGLT2 inhibitor, particularly high risk coronary heart disease with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, possibly it may replace, but as on now, still metformin could be first line drug. It is an acceptable CV safety profile. As a matter of fact, UKPDS in late, before the 2000, the data do suggest the safety of cardiovascular, the safety with metformin. So also, its effect on cardiovascular benefit, though there are no outcome study available, just like SGLT2 inhibitor or GLP-1 receptor antagonist. Sulfonylurea is one thing which is again important, like glimepiride and the glycoside. We don't use any more glibenclamide. Very sparingly we use the generation 1. Today we are talking more into generation 3 or the newer generation glimepiride or glycoside or glipizide. But otherwise, this is the one of the common drug we use as a secretagogue in a community practice. It has still role. I don't think we should write off sulfonylurea in our country, and I would personally feel it has still a place in fairly good number of patients who have a lot of economic or socio-economic issues, and it is a good stimulator of insulin secretion. So it's a secretagogue. Only downside is the weight gain, and to some extent hypoglycemia. But carefully, if you are using, I don't think it should be a major problem. Like I always tell, these two things occur if you don't know how to use this drug properly. So if you know how to use this drug properly, then these side effects are minimized. Still second line of drugs, because the first line of drug is still metformin, and then add-on drug becomes the second line is the sulfonylureas. Now coming to the glitazone, like if you see whether pioglitazone or rosiglitazone, weight gain is one issue, and then the CV outcome is the other thing, like producing heart failure, etc. Because this glitazone produces water retention. Of course, rosi we don't use now. Pioglitazone still, because it's an important drug for the insulin resistance. A small dose like 7.5 milligram. If there are no contraindication, we can still use. But because of its sodium retention, rather not sodium, water retention, it can precipitate patient of diabetes with heart failure, particularly advanced heart failure. But I personally feel a small dose, if you want to take the benefit for an insulin resistance, glitazone has still a role. Coming to the DPP-4 inhibitor, they are weight neutral, but they have side effects like a GI side effects and pancreatitis. But it is still a good drug according to me, and particularly got a neutral effect on CV outcome. We have got a new drug like a teneligliptin, which is quite useful in our part of the world. Teneligliptin has shown a big promise, along with conventional sitagliptin and linagliptin, very important, particularly for the renal point of view safety. Saxagliptin, because of the heart failure issue after the SAVOR-TIMI trial, we are holding it, but we have to be careful about this particular gliptin in a patient with a frank heart failure. About the AGA1 like drug like oglibose, they have a role like alpha glucosidase inhibitor. Oglibose is one which is weight neutral, but one of the side effects is the flatulence and diarrhea. So abroad, particularly in the developed countries, because of these side effects, they don't like this drug because of flatulence and diarrhea. It is a reasonably good drug, and to me, it is an important drug for a postprandial hyperglycemia. So in our practice of cardiovascular medicine, the glucoside inhibitor, particularly oglibose, has an important role in postprandial hyperglycemia, and this has got a lot of importance in reducing inflammation, endothelial function. So it is, little underused drug internationally, but and again, low risk of hypoglycemia, CV safety to be evaluated, but at the same time, it is not bad. It's a neutral effect. It's not like, drug like saxagliptin, etc. AGLT2 inhibitor, we have got all these multiple drugs available. Weight loss is good. Beneficial CV effects are seen because its effects on the pump, on the pipes and the kidney. Of course, the infection, urinary genital infection is one of the problem, but it's definitely coming as useful second line agent, particularly after or along with the metformin in a patient with a very high risk for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or a heart failure. So SGLT2 inhibitor, as a matter of fact, coming very high up in the selection of drug. Now, what are the recommendations for the injectables? I mentioned about the oral anti-diabetic. Now, let us talk about the injectable therapy. Now, if you see short-term insulin are used in following situation, like a catabolic symptom. If you have a patient who has, weight loss, who has, polyuria, who has excessive thirst, in short time, he has lost a lot of, the weight. That means, he is a catabolic state. And therefore, we have to see that we have to use insulin, and particularly when they got high glycemic parameters, fasting more than 200, more than 300 pp, and A1C more than 9, acute diabetic complication with a medical condition, hospitalized patient, not suitable for OAD, perioperative, transplant, critical care units, pregnancy, etc., are some of the situations where we have to use short-term insulin. Now, GLP-1 analog, as I mentioned earlier, is an important breakthrough, particularly after the trial which has shown the major outcome benefit, like a leader trial, or trial with semaglutide, or even trial with the other GLP-1, the pioneer trial. So GLP-1 is recommended as a first injectable option following situation like a concomitant CVD, CKD, where hypoglycemia and weight loss must be avoided. Importantly, because they are glucose independent. Advantage of GLP-1, like SGLT2, are they glucose independent. So hypoglycemia is not there. Can be also seen, can be used with CKD and CVD, and is an important thing. And therefore, the GLP-1 now from injectable is oral therapy also now available. GLP-1 semaglutide oral tablet is now available, and it can be going back to oral and also been injectable. So that's a very good news for us. And then, of course, the injectable is a basal insulin and GLP-1. Take best of both the injectable. That means give basal insulin for keeping the sugar at the basal situation, not during the prandial situation. That means keeping insulin level sustained at resting condition when we are not eating, but just we are doing our routine work. So basal insulin maybe at night time or maybe morning time, depending upon the situation, along with a small dose of GLP-1, maybe 0.6 milligram of the liraglutide, 1.2 milligram of liraglutide once a day, and this will also help us in sparing the insulin dose. Once the acuteness is over, when the requirement of insulin can go down, the GLP-1 takes over, and possibly we have a place where GLP-1 alone and a small dose of basal insulin can do trick in many of the patients. Now, choice of the insulin therapy is a basal insulin is the standard what we use, a human NPH insulin. Then you've got a Glargine 100 units, 300 units. We have got Determin, you have got Degludec. So all these basal insulins are available, which you take care at the basal level. On the top of that, we need a short-acting prandial insulin during, immediately before or after food, so that will take care of the prandial. Whereas if you come to the premix, you have got a combination of both short-acting, there's the prandial and the basal level of insulin. And normal, the proportion is 30-70. 30 is the short-acting, 70 is the intermediate or long-acting, or 50-50, 50% short-acting, 50 intermediate long-acting, or maybe 25-75. All different combination is available, and give this dose morning and night. So it's a premix sample. Or a prandial insulin, human regular insulin, like Lispro, Aspart, or your glucine. Yes, there are many available, or regular, our short acting like Act Rapid, etc. So you can have a basal insulin to take of insulin, basal resting insulin requirement, and with every food, because our requirement goes up with the food, and at that time substitute with basal the prandial. So basal and prandial together or a premix, a different proportion, is one of the way how the insulin therapy can be planned. So step for initiating premix insulin is the same thing like lifestyle modification first, metformin is the second, and then of course use of GLP-1 receptor antagonist the patient can afford. If it cannot, and if the A1C is more, and then we have got the titrating to insulin basal level, or maybe basal and prandial, or if people cannot still they take insulin, then maybe we can use SUs, or then we can add another gliptin, etc. And maybe that we can discuss during our question answer session. Steps for intensification of insulin therapy. Step 1, add prandial insulin. Like we said, glycemic targets are not met. That means basal level is maintained. But if you do the postprandial sugar, it is not under control. So normally what is the total dose requirement? Roughly 0.3 to 0.5 units kg, and 40 to 50% basal and 50 to 60% prandial. So divide this 50 to 60% prandial into number of times. Like if you are using 3 times insulin, maybe 15, 20, 20 like that 3 times, and maybe 40% at the basal level, the basal insulin. And this is total calculated from this one. Like if a patient is 60 kilo, 30 is the total dose of insulin, 15 you give basal, 15 you divide into say 5, 5, 5 like that. And then increase total day by 2 units per day, depending upon how is the level of sugar. You can titrate basically, depending upon what level. We have got a chart, and you can keep chart in front of you. These all are easy. It is just a simple mathematics that increase the total dose requirement according to the doing the blood sugar fasting. Basically, fasting sugar gives you idea about what is going on at the basal level, and postprandial gives us idea what is happening to the prandial dose of insulin. So morning sugar estimation gives you what is the effect of night dose of the basal insulin, and when you do the blood sugar 2 hours after lunch, which will give you what is happening to the prandial dose of insulin. Many times we do multiple postprandial blood sugar. I personally feel too many times giving pricking, doing level. I don't think it's that much important. We have to apply because the patient unnecessarily cannot adhere to our therapy, because over time they get sick with multiple prick every time you are giving after checking the sugar, etc. And then the quality of life suffers, etc. Always monitor for hypoglycemia, because hypoglycemia in the night time patient cannot recognize what is called as unawareness hypoglycemia. So these are the area where you have to be cautious of giving the reduced dose of basal insulin, and you have to also be careful that along with the basal in the night time, using a shorter the rapid acting insulin, we have to be very, very careful in here. And this is what we need to know how to intensify the dose of insulin therapy. This is one of very important the slide. And if I think if this one slide, if you remember, and if I think if I'm able to make you understand this slide, the entire webinar is successful. Very good, the wheel, therapeutic wheel is given. I've never seen anything as simpler as this, as put up by RSTA ESI, the Indian guideline. From the innermost to outermost, that means from innermost to the outermost, everything is included. Now coming to the ABCDH, if you see here S is a lifestyle modification, then comes your metformin, then comes all available agent. Now we look at this ABCDEH. This is important to remember. A means advancing age, B means increasing BMI, it is written here. C means advancing CKD, D means duration of diabetes, E means established cardiovascular disease. This is of socio-economic, finance. G is the glycemic status. Is it worsening glycemic control? H means patient getting hypoglycemia. Accordingly, you select a drug going from clockwise. Like as the age advances, DPP-4 better, alpha glucosidase is better, SGLT2 is better, pioglitazone is okay, sulfonylurea is okay, GLP-1 is okay, and then insulin is okay as the last one. That means again, everything. If you have got increasing BMI, SGLT2 or inhibitor and the GLP-1 inhibitor receptor agonist, not inhibitor, GLP-1 receptor agonist are the first choice. If you have got CKD, SGLT inhibitor, DPP-4, particularly drug like linagliptin. If you're talking about duration of diabetes, again you see how this pendulum goes like this. And again like if you see the established cardiovascular disease, you see the patient with the financial problem, SUs is the first one. See that the SUs are the first one mentioned here. Again your patient who have glycemic status, if worsening glycemic control, we have to be careful here again, and so on. So basically this particular wheel gives you idea which will be the first drug and why selection. And also this cost important, socio-economic we have to consider, and this is an important particular chart. Of course the hydroxychloroquine is one more drug now approved as a single dose 400 milligram by DCGI, and we are using type 2 diabetes. So also the saroglitazole, which is basically drugs we use for lipid therapy, high triglyceride, has been approved recently by DCGI for diabetic management. So these are the two things, hydroxychloroquine and saroglitazole, which is going to be available soon as a drug for diabetes. We know about hypertriglyceridemia, diabetic dyslipidemia are using, but for diabetes we have now clear-cut the approval by DCGI India. So it will be soon marketed for a use in diabetes. We have got major CVOT outcome trial in diabetes, and this is what came in 2008 after the EMA and the US FDA has put that first see the cardiovascular safety of the diabetic drug. Because we know that diabetes is a vascular disease, 7 out of 10 times patient dies due to vascular problem, particularly myocardial infarction. So we have got a various trial available right from 2013 to 2020 in a major cardiovascular outcome trial using various drugs like DPP-4 inhibitor, GLP-1 agonist, SGLT2 inhibitor, glitazone, alpha glucosidase, insulin PCSK. I'm not going into deep into the detail because it will be difficult because time will be difficult. Now, when you come to the recommended care for diabetes with a cardiovascular disease, that's the most important subject because 70% of diabetic patients suffer cardiovascular disease. They don't go into end stage, other complications. By that time, they succumb due to cardiovascular problem, either heart failure or coronary artery disease, left ventricular dysfunction, stroke, etc. CV risk should be assessed, lipid abnormalities should be taken care, hypertension should be taken care, smoking, family history, etc. Very, very important because Steno trial has shown us that it is controlling of multiple risk factor in a diabetic patient is important. Diabetes itself is, conglomeration of all the risk factors. Patient of a diabetes suffers from hypertension. Patient of diabetes suffers from dyslipidemia. If he is also additionally smoker, if he has got additional hyperuricemia, if he has got a strong family history of coronary artery disease, all those things we have to take care because these are all cardiovascular risk problem. Why we say diabetes as a CAD equivalent, that is the coronary artery disease equivalent, in the sense it means that if you got a diabetes, that means you already got coronary artery disease. So we have to see that the risk of cardiovascular system should be assessed. Patient with a diabetes and CVD should have following ABC treatment control goal. Very important. A is for A1C less than 7. B is BP less than 130/80, and cholesterol LDL less than 100. In fact, it is going further lower and lower. If you got a high risk, now the figure is less than 70. And if it's a very high risk, it is less than 50 to 55. So remember, this also is changing. SGLT2 inhibitor and GLP-1 receptor agonists, as I mentioned earlier, are approved by various regulatory authorities for CV risk reduction apart from their glucose lowering ability. Remember, these drugs we are using beyond sugar lowering effect. We are using for its other pleiotropic benefit on the heart pump, on the arteries or the blood vessels, on the kidney, etc. So this is important for us. Recommended therapy for obesity is again cutoff for us is BMI between 18 to 22.9 is normal for us. Anything more than 25 is generalized obesity. In between is low. So basically recommended care, for obesity, we have to remember few figure, because normally 18 to 22.9 is a normal for us Indians, and obesity anything more than 25, unlike the Western figure. This is important. Waist circumference 90 and 80 is a cutoff. In men it is 90 and in women it is 80. And of course, all the criteria for metabolic syndrome, etc. And these are again standard of the recommendation, and maybe we will talk about the detail during question answer, because the healthy lifestyle management, the caloric restriction, etc. There's nothing specifically any pharmacotherapy except for using GLP-1 agonist and maybe a SGLT2 inhibitor and DPP-4 inhibitor as an add-on to metformin in a patient who's obese. So only the importance is use of these drugs in obesity to reduce the drugs. So GLP-1 is the most useful, then comes the SGLT2, and then comes the DPP-4, and then comes the metformin. Aerobic exercise I already mentioned. We have to be careful now when you're talking about recommendation of diabetes care in CKD. Kidney function should be assessed for albuminuria, and anything more than 300 is called as macro, and between 30 to 30 milligram is microalbuminuria, and microalbuminuria is the early sign of atherosclerosis, and we have to be managed patient with a CKD carefully, because drug like ACE inhibitor, ARB, even using SGLT2 with kidney disease, we have to be careful. We have to see that the target should be more less than 130/80. We have to intensify management of blood sugar. We have to monitor the albumin creatine ratio, eGFR, serum potassium, etc. Because our time will be little, because we are already exceeding our time limit. So let me give you some of the overview, because otherwise there won't be time for us for the question answer. Now when you talk about the dose adjustment in a diabetic patient with a diabetic kidney disease, metformin, anything, remember, less than 30 ml GFR is relative contraindication for every drug. That is as a general principle. Anything less than 30, don't use metformin. Generally not use SGLT2 inhibitor. Of the label, people are still using, but the guideline recommendation not to use in less than 30, and all other things also generally we have to be cautious. But anything more than 60 normal dose, between 45 to 60 we have to use with a carefulness, and between 30 to 45 we have to use the half dose, and we have to be useful with the long-acting sulfonylureas, because they are cleared by the kidneys, so we have to reduce the dose, etc. Diabetic neuropathy, we have to remember about it, and more importantly, diabetic autonomic neuropathy. Autonomic neuropathy involving the cardiovascular system is important. One of the simple way is resting tachycardia, the absence of response to the Valsalva maneuver, etc. Because, the damage to the parasympathetic system, so there will be sympathetic overactivity, and diabetic autonomic neuropathy could have sudden death, silent ischemia, etc. So plus, the neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy, and therefore, very important to have a sugar control. And accordingly, some of the therapy which has been recommended, like pregabalin or gabapentin, duloxetine, etc. But essentially, we have to see that the control is properly done. Basically, all these microvascular complications are long-standing, the diabetes complication. However, we have to diagnose and we have to keep eye checkup regularly. Every birthday, every once a year at least, we have to do the proper retinal examination to see what exactly is happening in the eyes, any retinal changes, etc. is an important, guide or advice we can give to our patient. Recommendation for the diabetic food, like, we have to see all the, the structured food care education. These are important. Why I'm making a mention of this? Because we are, ignoring this fact. It may not be a field for the overall a cardiologist job. It may be a specialist who's involved in the diabetic food care. But we have to emphasize this point from the beginning of, the patient education, that how they must take care. We have to do the peripheral arterial Doppler that can give us diagnosis about peripheral vascular disease, and then accordingly we can treat therapy either with the therapy with the pharmacotherapy or even the vascular surgery. We have to also see the the recommended care for frequency of doing self-monitoring glucose. As you say that we have to do the sugar at home by doing a finger prick, and also depending upon whether patient on oral anti-diabetic or insulin plus oral anti-diabetic drugs, and we can do depending upon how early you want to get the sugar down, and accordingly 3 to 4 times in a day, or maybe once or twice a day, or once a week, like that. As I mentioned earlier, I would be little little cautious in informing everyone that don't overdo, because the adherence to the therapy will come in the way, quality of life will come in the way. Glucose monitoring is diabetes. We have to go into the all important history examination, eye examination, smoking cessation, BP measurement, screening for CVD, measurement of lipid. All these things, whatever I mentioned, these are all important in this setting. Use of technology, as I mentioned earlier, like how we can diagnose, the by the activity wise by pedometer or by the various gadgets. So also glucometer, diabetes apps, insulin pump, continuous glucose monitoring are some of the method what you can use the technology. Type 2 diabetes and pregnancy is very important. Like a preconception care is important. We have to see that the A1C level safe of 6.5 to 7 should be kept in mind, and the monitoring is again important. The is the between 6.8 and is the normal, this the level of A1C what you would like to keep. Insulin is the therapy of choice, but again considering our socio-economic, large majority of the patient cannot take that drug, so we try to keep on metformin, or even the SUs like a secretagogues, like glibenclamide safety has been proved. So also we have to see that drug like ACE, ARB should not be given, statin should not be given, folic acid small dose is important, and we have to also see that they should not get into hypoglycemia, and this is what is important for us to remember. All, as I mentioned, SUs like glimepiride, glibenclamide can be given, metformin can be given. Of course, insulin is the ideal one, rapid acting the analogs, but the problem is socio-economic issue. So in a community practice, difficult to follow. Community practice, many times a patient already on therapy, they come late. By the time they come to us, they're already pregnant. They've reached beyond 4 or 5 months, and therefore the safety of these two drugs have been reasonably good in pregnancy. All these drugs, as I mentioned, ACE inhibitor, ARC, all these should be not to be given during pre-consumption. Now let us talk about a little bit of the update from the ADA 2020. Most of the point what I discussed so far are in, for RSDA and in our ESI, they're all going more or less similar in ADA 2020 guideline. Only one particular slide I want to, just to re-emphasize that the approach to individualize the glycemic target is the key. This is the same even in the earlier ADA has been mentioned, but I just want to re-emphasize that we have to individualize the glycemic target. Like that risk potentially associated with hypoglycemia and the other drug adverse effects we have to see. Disease duration, newly diagnosed, more stringent. Long-standing, we know it's a lenient control. Life expectancy, like, long, more stringent. Short, lenient control. So all these parameters, like, more stringent is required with a, like a low risk of hypoglycemia, newly diagnosed, long expectancy, life expectancy, important comorbidities, established vascular complication, patient preference, etc., and readily available resource support system. Otherwise, we have to be careful that maybe a lenient control is what we require. Now, coming to this, some of the 2019, the latest update from the European, the ESC and the EASD guideline. And these are some of the new recommendations, like a CV risk assessment, resting ECG is recommended, carotid femoral ultrasound is recommended, screening with coronary CT angiogram or CT coronary calcification recommended. Ankle brachial index is an important risk marker, and normally the carotid intima media thickness earlier was recommended, but now it is no more recommended. So these are some of the risk, the recommendation when you have a patient of a diabetes, like a very high risk, moderate risk, depending upon the duration, target organ damage, the longevity of the disease, as well as the multiple risk factors. You classify because accordingly your target will be different. All the recommendations for glucose lowering agent, what I mentioned earlier in the Indian guideline, they hold true only with the class 1A, class 1B, etc. But they all are holding true like what Indian guideline. So also the revised guideline on prevention and the glucose lowering agent still remains. Also in ACS, that is acute coronary syndrome, and in a chronic coronary syndrome, all the revised guidelines are more or less same. Only thing is the aspirin I want to mention here, that 75 to 150 milligram is recommended as a secondary prevention. In a primary prevention, we have to select. We can't use in a primary prevention aspirin in everyone, but as a secondary prevention, it is fine. Whereas statin is recommended for all diabetic patients, as you know, in ACS, as well as a chronic stable patient. Lipid targets are going a little different, as I mentioned. Even Indian guidelines are getting LDL lower and lower. High risk is less than 70. Very high risk is less than. High risk is less than 70. Very high risk is going less than 50 to 55. So we are getting into more, the tougher or more aggressive control, and that has been very well accepted even by ESC and ESC guidelines. And of course, very high risk, as I mentioned, the LDL level reduction should be more aggressive. BP control, I did mention, less than 130 to 80, but we have to remember it should not go less than 120 systolic, and it should not go down to less than 70. So remember 120 to 130, 70 to 80, particularly when you got a patient who has got a stroke, who got a patient with a CKD, there is a provision to get pressure a little further low down, except for very old people who cannot tolerate this level, then possibly 130 to 139 is reasonable. But even in a good active elderly people, blood pressure level can go down if they're able to tolerate. Home BP monitoring should be considered in patient diabetes is important because both the white coat effect and the mask hypertension can be diagnosed. 24-hour BP is only selectively, at least once before starting therapy. Otherwise, on a routine basis, home BP self-monitoring is one of the important way forward. Revascularization, angioplasty versus CABG, PCI, we keep it for a low Sinter score and high Inter score. Surgery, we keep it reserved. But again, diabetes is one situation where we have to individualize in which patient you're going to do PCI and which patient you're going to put, patient or do CABG. Antithrombotic drugs, I mentioned aspirin for primary prevention is not recommended except for very high risk category. Secondary prevention aspirin 75 milligram is recommended, and in a patient of ACS, dual antiplatelet therapy is recommended, aspirin, clopidogrel or aspirin, ticagrelor, etc. And heart failure management is important for us to remember that we have to see use of all those newer drugs, like we know heart failure, like SGLT2 inhibitor. The ARNI is one thing. We're using sacubitril, valsartan. We are using ivabradine, and etc. GLP-1 receptor antagonist is also useful drug. So this all depends upon the type of patient. So now let me come to the last slide where I want to spend a few minutes before the winding up, because of course gone quite a bit because we have no option but to cover up the broad topic. So therefore I thought I will just get into the overview of this topic. Now let us discuss. These are the carry-on message of the webinar today. Educating the mass. For us as a physician who are treating or who are involved in the patient care, first we should know with the progress and where we are standing in 2020. And then we have to educate our patients. Now first thing is understanding diabetes, its epidemiology, type, severity. These all are important for us, particularly for us as well as our patient. We also should know how is the prevalence of this disease, how is the severity, how it is going, and what are the new therapy available to patients, and what is the recent epidemiological data of diabetes with a vascular disease like a stroke, coronary artery disease, heart failure, etc. So understanding the disease is very, very important for not only treating doctors, but also imparting this education to our patient. We may not have enough time to teach our patient, but I would request everyone to keep some educator or maybe like a nurse educator or some healthcare professional to spend, or just a simple audio visual for people to understand diabetes. Spend some time in understanding, or putting all patients together, taking them once a month, like a lecture or at a group discussion, etc. Then coming to the target of sugar and the monitoring. According to me, every time when patient comes to follow up, we need a figure. At least in my clinic, I see through that what is the target of everything. Like what is the weight of the patient? What is the blood pressure target when they come to the clinic? What is his blood sugar when he has come to the clinic? What is his BMI when he has come to the clinic? Because these all are very, very important to monitor and to target. Unless you are doing the proper care, I don't think we can minimize this complication. So we need to have the target, and this figure we have to give to the patient, because this also will improve the patient's, the adherence to the therapy. We are, putting confidence to patient mind. We can tell them, look here, your weight was 80. After 3 months, your weight has come down to 77, 78. So these all things, will ultimately improve patients, the psychological support, and patient will adhere to the therapy. Management of diabetes, diet planning should be very simple. Don't make things complicated, As I mentioned earlier, everything monitoring should be simple. Not to do every time self-monitoring glucose or a continuous frequently doing, because that will come in the way of quality of life. Diet planning will come in the way of quality of life. Make simple adjustment to patient's diet. First, inquire what patient is eating. Large majority of the patient, in a middle class or a lower middle class, they hardly are into too much of a diet, faddism. We can give them a simple planning, timing, and the the gap between the food, morning, afternoon, things like that, you know. So you give a plan, and a simple plan which is easily applicable and people can follow that. There is no point keeping a chart just on, you know, our treatment sheet. You simplify it and give a simple therapy, just oral. Tell them this is a few things, and maybe you give a printout of what extra dietetic restriction, but don't make it complicated. Physical activity is fundamental. Keep, you know, emphasis on this point every visit. Medication important. Sick day, travel day management is very, very important. We have to see when you are sick, what tablet should not be taken. When you're traveling, like when there is a change in, you know, like a diurnal variation, there may be a, you know, the jet lag, etc. We have to be careful about it. And also the diabetic complication, beside the standard vascular complication, foot care is very, very important. We are neglecting on that. Neuropathy, we are neglecting. Sexual dysfunction, we are neglecting, you know. All these microvascular complications, they are symptomatic, you know, in the long duration, like, you know, diabetes long standing, like retinopathy, neuropathy, or nephropathy. They're all more or less silent. Unless you do check or you have index of suspicion, you cannot make a diagnosis. Macrovascular complication, pick up them early. Prevention and annual screening is very, very important. As I mentioned, at least annual screening of one, you know, the eye checkup for retinopathy, or a vibration, you know, test for, you know, neuropathy, or doing a simple, you know, what is the basal heart rate to see for diabetic autonomic neuropathy, or maybe the eye checkup for retinopathy, etc. They are the simple way. You give it like, you know, every, like a celebration of birthday, but put a date one, maybe along with the birthday celebration, let them have an annual screening of their diabetic state. And most importantly, you should have a specialized approach depending upon the population you are handling. Adolescents, young people, we have to manage differently. Remember, they have a long life expectancy. They have got, you know, the disease like coronary artery disease at a young age. We have to see through it that their sugar is properly, aggressively controlled. We have to emphasize on all the lipid abnormality, hypertension, etc. Elderly people, we have to be careful enough to see that they don't get into hypoglycemia. We can be a little lenient control because they already, you know, their end of their life. So we need not have to worry too much about the strict control. Sex education is important. As a matter of fact, you know, all these sex-related issues could be the early symptoms of, you know, atherosclerosis and endothelial dysfunction. Don't, you know, give blame on our drugs. In fact, you know, all those, you know, sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction, etc., could be early indicator of, you know, the involvement of the atherosclerosis, and it could be an early indication of endothelial dysfunction. Of course, pre-conception counseling is very, very important because, you know, before conceiving, that what drug patient is on drug, what anti-diabetic or anti-hypertensive or other, you know, medical illness patient is receiving, and the patient is also diabetic, we have to counsel properly so that, you know, you get the message. With this, I would like to finish my talk, and now I will have we will have a question answer session, Jason. So
yes,
you can go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a wonderful presentation and precisely discussing almost every important aspect of diabetes. So as I was mentioning to you, we had a couple of about 20 odd questions that we filtered from the audience.
Yeah.
And most of them have been covered.
Yeah.
So,
Can we get down to the both this in the screen, me and Milind can be seen in the screen, or
so we have about 18 questions on the Q&A, sir.
We'll discuss, but in the screen, you know, I can't see Milind and how to get the people, how to get into.
We can see you, sir. I think there's some this thing, but Dr. Milind,
you can
there with us.
You can do from your side.
Yes, sir. Dr. Milind, would you like to take those questions, sir?
Well,
No,
yes,
but we,
first I should thank Dr. Sadanand Shetty sir for a very lucid presentation as usual. And it's difficult to cover such a lot of
yeah,
ground in a small span of time. And I think sir has been very thorough. He has given a big he has given covered a lot of material in such a short time, and most of the questions, I was looking at the questions coming up live, and I also have the list of questions with me. And as the
yeah,
presentation went on, the number of questions decreased because most of the questions were getting answered in the slides themselves. So I think
okay,
we should
okay.
take up some couple of 2 or 3
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
How much time do we have?
yeah. We can have,
Two
Jason, how much time we have now? It's about
We
15,
can
10,
answer, sir.
yeah,
As the
yeah,
question come up, we will.
maybe
yeah,
five.
yeah. 10, 15 minutes is okay. 10 minutes
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Milind.
one question which I also thought was important was one participant or a couple of participants have asked whether there are any differences in the side effect profile of the various SGLT2 inhibitors. For example, are UTIs more common with any particular agent, or is
Yeah.
DK common with any particular agent? So, is there anything really to choose between the various SGLT2 inhibitors as far as side effects are concerned?
Yeah. I don't think so, Milind. Most of the side effects are supposed to be more of a class effect, though some drug may claim that this is less with them, etc. But particularly, the urinary infection, is more common in our, because of the prevailing, the our weather conditions, and lot of the local hygiene, etc. Yeah. So this is one of the reason. But the genital infection is a reality, and it is one of the thing which can be seen in most of the SGLT2 inhibitor. So we have to take care of whatever hygienically we can take care. And when it comes is a very bad genetic infection, we have to maybe treat with whatever the antifungal if we make a diagnosis. But we have to keep it in mind, and we have to also we have to think about it. I don't think we can straight away say that this drug is totally without any side effects. But on the one side, we are looking into its the positive benefit, particularly in the heart pump, heart pipe, there's a coronary artery, and on the kidney. And the downside, as you said, is the genital infection. Urinary infection, I don't think is a big problem. Genital infection is a reality. And the other thing, like a furnace gangrene, in one of the study was shown, even in a placebo versus the drug. In fact, the data with the placebo was more than the drug. So basically, the diabetic milieu itself is such that, it's prone for urinary infection. You are prone for, more of a genital infection because the milieu of diabetes itself is bad. You can't blame a drug. But a female patient who has a short urethra, all these, infections are supposed to be more actually. But if you tell patient to have a little, local hygiene, cleaning, keeping it little clean, and many times, this, maybe the local, hygienic condition, weather condition, and maybe some of the organism can grow, particularly the E. coli in that particular situation, we have to be, little bit, careful with this, all this, advice. We have to advise this information to our patient beforehand. So as I mentioned in my that educating patient, we also should be educated ourselves that these side effects can occur. Whereas the diabetic ketoacidosis, I don't think is a major issue normally because it's a euglycemic ketoacidosis what you get. And it is, happens mainly whenever there is an acute, stress, acute infection, sepsis like that. In a routine practice, I don't think is a major issue. So I personally feel we need not have to worry too much about this particular entity, but and it is also supposed to be seen in really very high insulin requiring diabetic patients initially, etc. But generally I don't think it's that if here's something we have to remember. But important for us to remember, index of suspicion we have to keep. Whatever common thing side effects can occur with this drug, we should know as a physician. And we also have to address this issue. We have to explain this to patient in a simplistic way. If you tell them, in the first hand only that you can get these, you can get that, etc., then there will be problem. Because my personal feeling is that as I mentioned, all these diseases are long diseases. Therapy adherence is the key. If you're not adhering to the therapy and a good therapy is available, then it is a bad thing on our side. So it is a physician's responsibility to, give all these educative value, I feel. Yeah. Because now we know SGLT2 inhibitor, Milind, as you rightly said, and plus GLP-1 receptor agonists are, like upfront as the first drug with a patient of an diabetes with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, or patient who has got very high risk factors. Because with metformin or even without metformin, in a drug-naive patient, these drugs are recommended. So we are going to a stage beyond just diabetic control, but preventing the vascular complication, preventing effect on the muscle. We are underestimating diabetic muscle disease. In fact, more than the coronary artery, diabetic muscle disease is a more problem. In fact, that is the early problem supposed to be. And a diastolic dysfunction, simple parameter, or if you do some more diastolic parameter, there's an early parameter to suggest that already myocardial dysfunction has taken place in a diabetic patient. So we have to use all these drugs very carefully early stage of the disease. I agree there are downside side effects are there, but I don't think they're something different from one to one. I can say more or less they're a class effect. I would say maybe if at all very marginal, like we say canagliflozin, more amputation, etc., which has been later cadence trial as disreputed, and today it has been accepted that more or less amputation bypass is not necessarily only with cana. Like we have to see that patient who has got a vascular problem, you have got a peripheral vascular disease, and you want to start this therapy, do their ankle brachial index, do their Doppler study, exclude a severe disease. If it's a mild disease, nothing to worry. So we have to identify the risk actually, risk stratify, and then give the drug. But it is a very, very useful drug. So in 2020, I would feel individualized therapy wise, this has a place. Community-based therapy, you are in a municipal hospital, like a corporation hospital, large majority poor patient, still metformin SU combination is a role, or a double drug combination or a triple drug combination, because we have to make therapy simple. According to me, even a triple combination of SU with your metformin, with your AGI, your alpha glucose inhibitor, or with a small dose of glitazone is not bad at all, according to me. Or your combination of gliptin and a metformin, like that. So use judiciously, use multiple drugs acting at a different level, like as we discussed during hypertension webinar, then the control will be better and the side effect profile also will be less. Yeah. Yes, Milind. What do you say? What is your usage of SGLT2 inhibitor, particularly when you are dealing with diabetes, and a lot of our patients have cardiovascular disease, or say now heart failure, like we talk about DAPA-HF trial or EMPA-HF trial, etc. Don't you think it's important for us to start using these drugs, isn't it?
Yes, just for the benefit of the audience, I would summarize the cardiovascular effects of these two classes of drugs, because both these drugs are useful in heart disease because they reduce cardiovascular complications. So SGLT2 inhibitors predominantly reduce the incidence of heart failure and hospitalizations for heart failure. So as far as heart failure is concerned, SGLT2 inhibitors score big. And as far as atherosclerotic CVD and MACE related to that is major adverse cardiac events related to atherosclerotic disease are concerned, it is the GLP-1 analogs which are more useful.
So, I agree with you. Yeah.
So as far as the SGLT2 effect is concerned, let us not forget that they act on the proximal renal tubule, and they cause significant diuresis. So they are very useful in ingestion of patients. So in fact,
heart failure,
it has been called a super diuretic. A super diuretic in heart failure patient, it really reduces the volume overload, and that is one of the main mechanisms by which it benefits in heart failure. Because even the people who have conducted these trials don't quite know how it benefits in terms of the molecular. One of the
Correct. Yeah.
problems
Correct. Yeah.
if you have a volume overloaded patient and you're giving an anti-diabetic agent, patient in heart failure, especially with decreased ejection fraction, then HLT2 inhibitors are good drugs to add. And very importantly, one should take all the precautions, one should counsel the patients appropriately. And it remains to be seen whether, they can be a substitute for some of the conventional agents. But definitely as an add-on therapy in diabetic patients, I think, sir, the time has come to consider them in our day-to-day practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And one more question was, can you just summarize for the audience some of the common drug interactions in patients on anti-diabetic drugs? Few of 2 or 3 common drug interactions which they should be aware of.
See, basically interaction means, like for example, if you are using normally, according to me, like, normal combination, metformin can gel with, most of the drug, any anti-diabetic drugs. Now interaction comes to, if at all, when the GFR, is less, and now you are using with, some other nephrotoxic drugs, that may come in the way of, like, it's like a careful using. That's what I said, in a CKD setting, how to use, we have to be careful. You could not blame that now this drug has produced lactic acidosis because of, its effect on the kidney and then producing all those renal issues, etc. So also suppose you are using, sulfonyl,
Yeah,
sorry,
exactly.
you can tell.
Yes.
Yeah. So also if you talk about, SUs, sulfonylureas, they produce, hypoglycemia, Now, if you are also using insulin along with that, again, we have to be a little careful, because sometimes we do use, like a basal level of insulin to make, sugar control, even with the SUs, because there's a secretagogues we are using. But these two drugs together again can have a tendency of hypo and weight gain is more like that, or glitazone producing, at the same time you are using drug, which are, like an anti-inflammatory drug, or one which will, increase, water retention, sodium retention. This is the issues what we have to see. So I personally feel, by itself, when you look at the correct way of using these drugs indication wise, and if you look at, all the parameters like heart failure, look at a renal failure, look at a GFR, then the question of, the situation always a problem. Now, for example, you are using SGLT2 inhibitor plus ARNI, or, like ACE inhibitor ARBs, then, your creatinine will go up and your, things will, increase, particularly in a CKD setting. So we have to be cautious enough. So I don't think that by itself, drug interaction in a direct way, I would say, it's a more of, like, the other comorbid situation, which makes, possibly the effect of one or the dose, maybe it can become beyond the therapeutic value. This is what I think. What do you think about it? Anything particular point? Anything from that particular questions?
Fair enough. I think you have answered their question. And
Yeah,
a
yeah.
couple of questions have come up about diabetic management in the elderly. So could you just give a few practical tips as to what the target should be and what would be your routine choice of medications in elderly population, especially above the age of 70 years?
Yeah. As I showed, in our elderly, one thing, of course, metformin is one drug we use as such in most of the patient. The gliptin is one, I would say, probably, like, whatever gliptin you want to use. I'm at the moment more into your teneligliptin, etc. So that is one thing, using drug like AGI, like as I told, Oglibos is a good drug because they're reasonably safe, etc. SUs, if at all you would like to use very small dose, like today we are fortunate because that way we must envy our pharma industry, because, we have got a combination of 0.5 milligram of glimepiride with 500 metformin, or even 0.5 with 1000 milligram metformin. So you can use a very small dose as a secretagogues also. Generally, the GLP receptor agonists, we don't use much. Insulin, we try to limit in elderly people. Then comes to the SGLT2 inhibitor, if there is a definite reason for using, is fine. Glitazone, I don't think very much we are making use in elderly people. So I think, basically I would see the A1C level beyond, like a maybe very active elderly guy, maybe 7+, I may keep. Even up to 7.5 also is reasonable. I would not, go on very strict, less than 70, etc. I would dare, more on, hyperglycemia than hypoglycemia, because, as I don't know what I mentioned, what is the, your memory effect, like, metabolic memory effect. Like if you are taken care of diabetic control in the early part of diabetes with aggressive control, then, the later period of your life, even the sugar is little, lenient control, all this complication can be easily prevented. Yeah. So basically, we need not be very aggressive. As I shown in one of the slide, we can be lenient, so keep A1C little level high. Fasting, you can go even up to 130, 140. Postprandial, you can keep up to 170, 180. I mean, this is what personally I keep on the higher level, because particularly these elderly people may have comorbid conditions. They have, heart disease, they have got coronary artery disease. Any episode of hypoglycemia may be dangerous to them, because they should not get into any uh, arrhythmic death, or precipitating myocardial infarction, or maybe unresponsive hypoglycemia in the sleeping time. So we have to be cautious enough. So glucose dependent, independent, like a drug will be preferable, like, but not the injectable one, I would say. Yeah. More like the simpler drugs, I would say.
Maybe one last question. Some participants have asked about hydroxychloroquine, since it has been,
Yeah.
this is a drug which has in the long run, it's been used for various forms of arthritis, and there are certain side effects and concerns with it. So which are the specific patients in which you would consider using?
See, basically one thing, Milan, people who are suffering from RA, they have got little high incidence of diabetes. That is one thing, And RA, even otherwise also is considered as one of the risk sort of, something like, exactly enhancer, like, all these inflammatory diseases
Yeah,
are one of the,
concerns.
are the enhancers, like psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, SLEs, So basically this drug, because of, use in RA as an anti-inflammatory drug, like a disease modifying drug. And now we see in a diabetes, like you talk about GLP-1 receptor agonist, is an anti-inflammatory. It reduces the vascular inflammation, it reduces the inflammation of the heart, it reduces the atherosclerosis, therefore it is a beneficial. So the surmise of this use came that way, and then also it was seen that the control is reasonable, That means even up to 0.8, 0.9% A1C level comes down with that. Single dose, I think specifically 400 milligram is done only for, diabetic use. And this is the way it has been, possibly has been suggested. Now you have a patient where, we have got a limitation of using other drugs, some contraindication, and we can't use these drugs, then possibly using this even in a diabetic is fine. Agree some, skin problem, it's, other, the toxicity we know. I don't think, cardiovascular toxicity is very much, is unlessly, become more during our COVID time. I don't think hydroxychloroquine is, cardio safe actually.
Once in a while, one
Yeah,
can
once in a while, fine. I'm not saying totally blanket no, but not to the extent what we have been projected. So basically, all those, it's a effect on the eye, one thing. The slit lamp examination once a year has been recommended. So I think, this drug is reasonable. I'm not trying to say. Only thing is that patient should tolerate also. After starting a drug, if patient cannot tolerate at all, we are no way. And the second drug, as I mentioned, is the saroglitazar, which is a DCGI approved. In fact, I was in the committee. In fact, I was called in Delhi for the approval. And this was about sometime, maybe 4 or 5 months back. And it has been approved, officially at that time. Because again, A1C up to 0.91% reduction can occur with saroglitazar. So we have a diabetes patient who has also atherogenic diabetic dyslipidemia, which reduces, sugar, which reduces triglyceride, which reduces, non-HDL cholesterol. So now we have got, these two additional drugs, because one for PPAR gamma for diabetes and PPAR alpha action for, triglyceride. So therefore, these two drugs, are additional drugs. See, the point, Milind, I'm not trying to say use it right and left, but as I mentioned, education, value of education, we should know the progress, what is going on in this field, and that is why this, sharing of information. So hydroxychloroquine and saroglitazole, hydroxychloroquine is already, in use for some time. At least I think year or two is already in use, though our use is limited, but, specifically inflammatory, all those, joint disease, a patient who has, disease, where I would like to use an anti-inflammatory disease modifying drug, then
Probably be a good drug to use in a patient who has another indication for hydroxychloroquine.
exactly, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So
So
many
you
other
got,
medications available. We would not
yeah,
primarily start
yeah,
NC2 as
yeah,
a first choice drug.
exactly, yeah. Okay, I think now should be enough.
Cover most of
I will go.
Sir, just one last question, sir.
Okay,
Your
okay.
comments on the importance of dental health, or rather oral health, in diabetic patients.
Yeah, there are a
Yeah,
lot of questions on dental health. So
yeah. Just tell Milind, you want to answer anything on the dental health again?
no, I think
Dental health and anything. Yeah, basically, there is, I don't know anything specifically. Dental health in general, all these, subclinical infection as such, these are in a diabetic individual, like, all those gums are related to this. And as we think in general, the gums and the oral infection could be a nidus for, chronic infection. And we have, in fact, as one of the important reason for getting even, the infarction, myocardial infarction, like a people who are suffering from recurrent viral infection, people whose oral hygienic condition is not good, who are having periodontitis or, all these related infection, and then, they can get, antibody or, continuously this, antigen antibody complexes, may come in the way and can produce all these particular, myocardial infarction. The earlier we have got, all these viral infection, mycoplasma pneumoniae, or many other, like your Legionella and all, infection, and then producing MI due to the, all these immune complex reason. So I think,
the complication of diabetes, possible complication, and
yeah,
probably a good dental checkup and regular screening
yeah,
and maintaining
yeah,
dental
exactly, yeah,
flossing,
yeah,
those things which
yeah.
are not
So,
done
yeah,
very commonly. I think probably diabetic patients need to be more.
yeah.
Apart from that,
So basically,
usual things we may not be able to discuss, we not being dental surgeons, but
exactly,
general principles like any other complication, this should be monitored, detected early, and treated.
yeah, basically, it's important point of view, oral hygiene. What is dental hygiene? Oral hygiene is important thing. I agree. Yeah. Chronic subclinical infection could be an nidus. See, even before eye surgery, surgeon asks for dental examination, because this chronic subclinical and infection can come in the way of, infection in the eye when they are doing, all this, the cataract surgery, etc. In fact, dental examination, they are those so critical, yeah. In fact, I have few ophthalmic surgeons who are so careful without proper dental examination, they won't do any cataract surgery. So I think it's an important source we know, and so it is a little hidden one, and it's a neglected area. So I think, as Milind rightly mentioned, keeping oral health or the dental health is important, not only for a diabetic care, but also, chronic infection, and then, all those, the immune complex, infection due to the bacterial agents, and then getting into, this all antibody and immune complex, and getting even acute MI. Like there are a lot of report of antibody, the MI during acute infection, viral infection, etc. This is what, this even COVID now, one of the reason why we get is, like this all there, we are more prone for all these, the immune complex involvement of the coronary artery, etc. Okay, Jason? I think
Yes, sir.
anything more? I think that should be
I think,
winding up. And
sir, we have been quite
Yes, sir.
comprehensive, and within the time available, we have covered a vast range of.
because basically because the time, is also important. You can't go on talking. Is a large topic.
One more in
What
the
I,
future we discuss.
yeah, what I wanted is a overview, yeah. So maybe
Yes.
the next, I told Jason, maybe the lipid guideline, that we will do the next one, that we will decide, that we can
Absolutely.
inform our members, yeah. And Jason, you want to conclude?
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We have come to an end of this engaging and very interactive webinar. I'd like to sincerely thank Dr. Sadanand and Dr. Milan for discussing and all the important topics of managing diabetes in India. And to summarize, sir, we had a very elaborate discussion on practice recommendations, lifestyle interventions, guidelines, medications, and also diabetic related complications. We also had interesting questions this evening from the audience, and I express my gratitude to the speakers in listing the questions and answering them. Most of the unanswered questions, I'd take time with Dr. Sadanand and then get back to you with the answers, whatever is relevant. And a note to the delegates as well, the presentation of this webinar along with the video recording will be shared over an email in a couple of days. And as Dr. Sadanand mentioned, please tune in for more updates on our future webinars and share with us what topics you would like to listen from our speakers. Well, as Dr. Sadanand mentioned, the next topic would be on lipids. So we'll wait for another interesting webinar altogether. Thank you, doctors. Thank you, speakers, and have a great evening.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Milin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Okay. Thank you.